All right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for Managing a Remote Workforce, Hiring, Onboarding, and Dismissal. I'm Jackie Petroselli, the Marketing Specialist at MP. For those of you joining us on a webinar for the first time, MP is a full-service human capital management services company offering a suite of products and services, including HR, payroll, benefits administration, time and attendance, and compliance. We support our clients with cutting-edge technical solutions, as well as proactive, reliable service and deep HR and payroll expertise. MP is wired for HR and helps clients succeed by tying their operations to their business goals. Your presenters today are Amanda Bridge, Max Doyle, and Brittany Holmes. Amanda Bridge is an HR generalist at MP. She currently provides HR support to small, medium, and large-sized businesses in a variety of industries and was previously an HR generalist for a 200-plus employee pediatric nonprofit organization. Max Doyle is an HR generalist at MP as well. He currently provides HR support to clients of MP and previously was the head of HR at several healthcare technology startups. Max received his BA from the UMass Boston in 2013. Brittany Holmes is a data and project specialist at MP. Formerly the software trainer at MP, Brittany has nearly 10 years experience in the payroll/HRIS industry. She currently provides support internally by managing retirement and garnishment administration for our small, medium, and large businesses. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic off to Max to get started.
Good afternoon, everybody. Before we begin, just a quick reminder that the training is intended for educational and informational purposes. And while we hope that you learn a lot with us today, just a reminder that we are not attorneys and that the information that we provide to you today should not be construed as legal advice. So to jump into the presentation topics for today, first, we're going to be going over new hire forms, the welcome process, first day and next steps, termination preparation, remote offboarding, and I11 and onboarding and offboarding solutions. So I'm going to hand it over to Amanda first to talk about why onboarding is so important.
Thank you, Max. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be presenting on this topic today as it is something I am passionate about. Before we dive into the presentation, let's talk about why a successful onboarding matters, even more so now in a remote environment where employees can feel even more disconnected. So according to a Gallup survey, only 12% of employees agree that their company does a good job onboarding. And even more astonishing is that almost a third of employees leave their workplace within 6 months of being hired. SHRM even says that employee turnover could be as much as 50% in the first 18 months of employment. We will now take a look at one of the first steps in the onboarding process, new hire forms. Some important things to consider when onboarding remotely is having the ability for electronic forms. It is important to make all company documents available online, especially those that need employee acknowledgement. Don't forget the federal and state notices that you are required to distribute at hire, such as the FFCRA and COBRA notices. For example, here in Massachusetts, we do distribute notices for also the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, Massachusetts Earned Paid Sick Time, and Paid Family and Medical Leave Act. We will talk more about the required I-9 and the certifications of documents in the next slide. But when completing forms electronically, it is also going to be important to explain to the employee how to complete them thoroughly as possible, as you would normally be there to assist the employee when they are completing them in the office. A suggestion would be to schedule a Zoom meeting if the employee needs more guidance or has any questions. Employment law posters are also something to consider when an employee is working remotely. You will want to make sure that you're up to date with all posting requirements and that the employee has access to them all. You will also want to communicate where they are located. So for example, on the company's intranet. And lastly, having user-friendly software that allows employees to e-sign documents is going to be the best way to leverage technology rather than having an employee print, sign, and then scan the documents. So for the Form I-9 in remote workers, on February 1st, 2021, the Department of Homeland Security once again extended the I-9 flexibility requirements to March 31st, 2021. This policy applies to employers whose workplace is remote. Employers must inspect the Section 2 documents remotely, and this can be done over video link, fax, or email. You will also want to obtain, inspect, and keep copies of the documents. This needs to be completed within 3 business days for purposes of completing Section 2. Employers will also want to list COVID-19 as the reason for the physical inspection delay in Section 2 under Additional Information field. Once normal operations resume, all employees who were onboarded using remote verification must report to their employer within 3 business days for in-person verification of identity and employment eligibility. Once these documents have been physically examined, the employer should add the documents to the physically examined section with the date of inspection. This will be added to the Section 2 documents or additional information field on the Form I-9. There are also no exceptions being made for employees who are physically present at the work locations, so employers must verify their identity in person. DHS has noted that they will continue to monitor the ongoing national emergency and provide guidance as needed. Now I will pass it back over to Max.
Thank you, Amanda. So obviously remote work has created some new challenges for us for onboarding, and it's required us to come up with some creative ways to integrate new employees to the team. So let's go over some of the best practices for remote hiring. So before your employee's first day, they should already be getting introduced to your company and its cultures. So here's some ideas to make that happen. To help your employee get an idea of who they'll be working with, an updated org chart that ideally has names, titles, and a picture of each employee is going to help put faces to names. And it can be a helpful tool for your new hire as they're not able to see their new coworkers in person in an office. With everyone being remote too, introducing a new team member is harder than normal. So my suggestion to solve for that is doing what I call a get to know you profile. This can be shared with the company prior to the employee's start or on their first day. These tend to have the typical information like where they worked previously, where they went to college, but it should also include some casual information such as interests, hobbies, or interesting facts about the employee. I found that with everyone being remote, that type of casual information and casual conversation, it just tends to be missed when you're not able to stop and chat at someone's desk, and when most of the communication we do remotely is often task oriented. I also suggest making sure that the new hire has met their direct team before their first day. So in my experience at MP, I was hired during COVID-19, during all the pandemic, and I was able to meet my now coworkers in the interview process, and it was a great way for me to meet everyone and for the team to get a sense of what working with me would be like. So if you chose not to include their direct coworkers in the interview process, I would recommend setting up at least a half-hour meet and greet so your new hire is able to get familiarized with their new team before their first day. So while all of that's happening, your new hire should also be learning about the company's culture. So things like sharing the company's values, any kinds of philanthropic initiatives or past team outings are a great way to introduce your new hire to the company's culture before their first day. So this is ensuring that by day one, they're already tuned into the culture and they're aware of what makes your company run. It can all be compiled in a virtual package that can be shared by HR before their start date so that they're able to review this before they start. Another nice touch that I always recommend is some kind of like swag bag, gift basket, something that makes the new hire feel welcomed and important, and it helps establish a culture of caring for your employees and just general wellness overall. Same thing when I started with MP, I was completely surprised by a gift basket that I received, and I was already excited about joining the team, and this just made me feel even more excited. It's also important to address the expectations that come from working remotely. I think a lot of things that we haven't had to think about before is, your dress code when you're remote, any kind of technology etiquette. So, things like, do you have to have your camera on for all Zoom meetings? Do you need to be in front of your computer at home, or can they take a call from the car? Do you require them to schedule an appointment for every Zoom call, or can you call without an appointment? And are they required to use the devices given to them by the company, or can they use like a personal laptop or their personal cell phone to make calls? I just think that addressing these things before their start date will help set the standard for how they should be working and how the company operates remotely, and ensures that they're aware of, just how everything is done in a remote environment. So if they are going to be receiving company property, make sure that you're documenting which devices they're receiving and that they're all set up and ready to go by day one. Make sure you're covering all the bases with this too. Any applications, any logins, any appropriate access levels that can be given at before their first day, they should all be ready to go so that on day one, they can just jump right in, log in, get things set up, rather than their first day just being completely full of IT setup. If you're fully remote, make sure you make arrangements for the devices to be picked up by the employee, or that they're arriving by their first day if you're shipping it to them, if the person doesn't live close to the office, or if they just aren't able to come into the office. So now you've done everything you can to prepare for their first day. They're finally starting, and you are just super excited that they're joining the team. The first day, as you know, is so crucial in setting up your new hire for a long, successful career with the company. So first, I wanted to get into a quote by Zig Ziglar that says, "The only thing worse than training your employees and losing them is not training them and keeping them." I think this speaks directly to why appropriately training your new hires is so important to their success and the company's success. So let's go into a little more detail about their first day. So I think everyone has probably experienced this. The last thing that you want your new hire doing on their first day is sitting around and waiting for someone to reach out to them and tell them what to do, or have the new hire not knowing what to do. So I always advise having a complete schedule of what they'll be doing, who they'll be meeting with. It just helps set up some structure for their first day, and it shows that you're setting them up for success. Things you might be scheduling remotely for their first day are things like a virtual meeting with their direct supervisor, any kind of like casual video call check-ins with their direct coworkers, just welcoming them on their first day, introductory meetings with other department heads, any calls with IT, or any kind of like platform training just to get them acclimated to their work, and potentially any like meeting with HR. So I think that having that specific different, like its own meeting for policy review with HR helps reinforce the policies that the company feels that everyone should be aware of at all times. So I think, for example, like sexual harassment and discrimination isn't only something that's in the office. It's just as important, and it's in a remote environment. So I think that, this could be reinforced in an introductory call with HR. It's also a good opportunity for you to revisit the company values again, or to discuss the company's culture in more depth. So then, along with any introductions or general trainings, it also isn't a bad idea to schedule some role-specific training, or maybe a shadow with a mentor for their first week. It's going to start to acclimate them to their specific role, and it's going to begin to set them up for success right from their first day. So just as remote onboarding has created new challenges for us, so does remote offboarding. As always, it is extremely important to prepare as much as possible for an offboarding, and extra care should be taken when doing it remotely. So for the sake of this discussion, I'm mostly going to be talking about a termination versus a resignation, but some of the tips can be applied to both scenarios. So again, I wanted to start off with another quote by Benjamin Franklin that says, "Failing to prepare is preparing to fail." And I think that that summarizes what makes for an easy or difficult offboarding. Preparing for an offboarding is essential to it running as smoothly as possible. And next slide, thank you. Once a decision has been made regarding a termination, you should begin to prepare for the discussion and make the appropriate arrangements that you need to make sure that the meeting runs as smoothly as possible. So as always, you're going to want to write a termination letter, summarizing the discussion, and it's going to include any necessary information about things like their benefit continuation, any kind of remaining PTO payout, or any final wages that they'll be receiving. Since this is all being done remotely, consider sending this and any other state mandated unemployment docs or brochures to a personal email that you might have on file for this employee once that conversation takes place. If you don't have a personal information, if you don't have a personal email for this person, you should definitely be asking for it during this conversation, as well as offering to mail the documents to their house. You'd also want to make sure that you have a personal email as well in the event for year end when you're sending out W-2s. If you send that electronically, having a way to contact them is necessary for that. So prior to the termination meeting, I always suggest to ensuring that any virtual access to email, applications, any kind of private or confidential information has been suspended, so that the employee doesn't have the opportunity to download any confidential company information or communicate with the company after they've been terminated. The hardest part about this, and the most essential part, is the timing for it. So if you're doing it too early on before the discussion, this could tip somebody off that this kind of discussion is going to take place, and that could cause some kind of issue. But also waiting too long could end in a breach of data. So just be very cognizant of when you're doing this, that it's not too early, not too late. So now I'm going to kick it back over to Amanda for a more in-depth discussion about the termination meeting.
Thank you, Max. That was some great information. Now let's take a look at some things to consider for the actual termination meeting. So as Max mentioned, you want the offboarding process to go as smoothly as possible. That being said, you want to prepare your virtual space to assure it is free from distraction. Also, make sure that you don't have any connection issues. Be courteous of the situation and make sure you are able to be in a private, quiet place so that you can have a confidential conversation. That is a hard thing to find these days in this remote world, but a place without kids, family, or pets in the background will be best to conduct a termination meeting. Having a witness present during your termination meeting can help, as terminations are notorious and well known in court cases. This will only help you in the long run for the off chance that they would need to testify, stating that the termination process was carried out fairly. During the meeting, you will want to let the employee know the reason for their termination. Sometimes in the moment, people sometimes need some time to process it, so don't be afraid of any uncomfortable silence. You will also want to discuss what this means for them regarding their final pay and when they'll receive it, any benefits and when they will end, and how to continue them if that's applicable, and for health insurance, when the last day of coverage will be and when they should expect to receive their COBRA paperwork. Also, for 401ks, you will want to let them know that the 401k provider will send them a package with their options. There are many final pay requirements in different states, so you will want to make sure that you are providing the employee their final paycheck and possibly any accrued but unused paid time off in accordance with that state's law. Now we'll go over to talk about return of company property, and this can definitely be one of the hardest parts of remote offboarding. Returning property tends to be easier when it's in person. When an employee is remote, new problems arise that we can't solve for. So let's go over how to have your employee return company property after they have parted ways with the company. It is important when preparing for termination to consult a list of company property assigned to the employee. This can be housed in a document or even tracked in an HRIS system. This will help determine what needs to be returned, what can be shipped, what might be unreturnable, and also what devices may have been forgotten about over the course of their employment. If this isn't something you currently do for your employees, consider tracking what devices are assigned to employees to prevent a situation where property wouldn't be returned. To make the return of company property easier, you could order prepaid shipping supplies such as prepaid shipping labels in a box through a shipping company, which is close to where the employee would live. Depending on the circumstance, you might also want to be able to make arrangements to have the employee return any company property to your office or to a designated employee who can meet the employee safely with the offboarded employee, or who can meet safely with the offboarded employee. This would obviously depend if they were laid off or terminated for cause. You will also want to check to see if the employee has any personal property in the office, if that's applicable, and if so, let them know that you will be packaging it up and will return it to them. I'm going to now pass it over to Brittany, who will talk about how iSolved can assist with this process.
Great, thanks Amanda. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. I would first like to start by talking about some of the features in iSolved, which is our software technology that can help with the onboarding and offboarding process for your employees. So as we know, the remote world has posed quite a few challenges for companies hiring and dismissing employees, and these features may actually be able to help. So let's start by talking about new hire onboarding. New hire onboarding is a feature within iSolved that provides employees with an electronic solution for the new hire paperwork. So essentially, the new employee goes in, they'll enter their information directly into iSolved. That will eliminate the need for your HR team or the payroll admin to enter the data directly from paper forms. It also allows you to have a consistent user experience for all new hires. The new hire, the new employee, is guided through the new hire process. That is configurable completely based on your needs, your company's needs, to complete their employee data. Once it's complete, the employee and then also the HR team or your company are notified that the entries are complete and they are available for final review. The only information that your HR team or your payroll admin will need to fill out is the employee's rate of pay, their employment status, and who their manager or their supervisor is. The new hire onboarding process also allows you to keep all of your employee documents up to date and stored in the same platform that you run payroll and reports from. This feature allows the ability for your employees to electronically consent to e-signatures so they can sign any electronic company forms. For example, an acknowledgement of your company handbook. They can fill out PDF forms right through the system. They can complete their federal and state tax withholding forms. Actually, the great thing about onboarding is that depending on where your employee works and where they live, the system is smart enough to know where they should be taxed. So those forms, you don't have to worry about your HR team printing those out and handing them to the employee and hoping that those state forms are correct. The system knows which forms they need to fill out and how they should be taxed appropriately. And they can also upload their own documents for I-9 verification. With onboarding, the electronic onboarding service, the ability for the employees to fill out their work opportunity tax credit forms happens. So you, their employer, may actually be eligible for some significant federal tax credits once those forms are completed by the employee and submitted to the state workforce agency. So having your employee log in, fill out all their own forms, electronically sign any documents you need, and upload their own documents for verification, that's just such a peace of mind for you as the employer to have one simplified, easy place to access all of it. Now, once the employee has completed onboarding and it's been finalized by whoever you've designated, the HR team or the payroll admin, the employee is then automatically set up with their own user account for iSolved. So then once they log in, they can go through electronic open enrollment. They can log into our software training platform. They can view their own pay stubs, view their own tax forms, and update their own information. So it's one login for them to go through onboarding and then for them to access their information once they've been hired. And then in addition to onboarding, this is less frequent, I guess, but we do offer this to quite a bit of our clients, is the electronic reboarding service, which is essentially the same process as onboarding, but it's for your employees who've been previously inactivated or terminated from your company and are now returning to work for you. So instead of you having to capture all of their new hire information, you can configure it so it simply asks them to update anything that may have changed since they were last employed. As we know, in this remote world, people are being laid off, but then returning to work, now that things are opening up a little bit, this reboarding service may help. And now let's move on to offboarding, which is another electronic solution that we offer for employees who are being dismissed from the company. This process works very similarly to onboarding, but it's typically completed by the admin who's actually dismissing the employee. This feature also allows you to complete all of the necessary steps to successfully dismiss an employee following their resignation or termination. It prevents errors from occurring, such as not collecting company assets. Amanda talked about the importance of that. Verifying that your garnishments and your benefits have a stop date, notifying benefit providers, updating accruals, arrears balances, and other pay items that are important. So once the employee has been dismissed from the company, the offboarding wizard will allow you to complete a list of steps. It's configured again by your company to capture only the information needed for you to finalize an employee's dismissal. And different workflows can actually be set up so that you can have multiple individuals from your company involved in this process. For example, maybe IT needs to be notified when there's company asset collections. HR needs to be notified about benefit and garnishment terminations, and your payroll admin handles the pay items and arrears balances. You can have different workflows set up throughout that whole offboarding process. The offboarding wizard is great. It works in a very easy to follow step-by-step process. First, we gather the termination details, the date, the reason, the type. It also allows your admin to upload any documents, the termination letter, or any notes regarding the termination. You can upload that right into the system. Next, it's going to list a display of all of the assets that were assigned to the employee. The admin can then enter the date for when the items were returned or expected to be returned. Following that, you're prompted to enter any stop dates for active benefit plans. You're also going to see any pending benefit plans, and you have the ability to stop any active GTL plans. If you are utilizing a benefit admin service through MP, many times the provider can actually be notified upon the employee's termination date automatically. Once those plans are terminated or stopped or removed, you'll also have the ability to update leave accrual balances and pay out anything that needs to be paid out. You can also see and delete any pending absences. And if the employee is a manager or a supervisor and they've just been dismissed, of course, they have direct reports still reporting to them. You can easily unassign them from their direct reports and replace the direct reports with a new manager or supervisor. And then finally, if the employee has any arrears balances due or any garnishments set up, the admin can easily update the arrears balance to reflect on the employee's final paycheck, and then also put an expiration date on the employee's garnishment. Utilizing these tools, the offboarding tool and the onboarding tool, just allows you to have a consistent experience for all of your employees. And then with offboarding specifically, it allows you to keep a very clear record of what happened, of the termination, and any termination reports right in the exact same system that you use for payroll and record keeping. It's housed in the same place, so you'll have easy access to it anytime you need it. And at this point, I am going to turn the presenter role over to Max and Amanda, as they'll be answering a couple of the questions that have come through the Q&A box. Thanks all.
Thank you, Brittany.
So looks like we got a few questions. Amanda, let me throw this one out to you first. Says,
All right.
For these get to know you profiles, where do those live and where are they shared and who are they shared with?
So I love that question because, as you know, as I mentioned, this is something I'm passionate about. I think it's really great so that team members can learn a little bit more about who they work with and some of their interests. And so we have actually done this at MassPay, And they're actually housed on our website. So if you have someone who can, video things or even set up something so that employees can talk for, a lot of amount of time, maybe there's some questions that you can have them answer. And if you don't want to have it set up on your company website where, prospects or clients or anyone can view it, it can also be housed, maybe in some kind of, Teams dashboard or a link to that so that people could, select that link and take a look at who their teammates are. I think there's definitely a few options for technology to be able to do that, where you have a separate place that will link you to, the employees' videos or profiles. If you don't want to go as far as a video, maybe just like some facts about each employee that you can have on an ongoing document with a set of questions that could be asked or answered that employees can choose from. I think that's really a great way to kind of learn a little bit more about who you work with on the day-to-day without, having it just all be about work all the time. You get to know people a little bit more on a personal level.
Yeah, and just to go off of that, Amanda, I think the biggest thing to think about there is it should just be wherever everyone can look at it, depending on the level of technology that you have. I've done it as simply as I sent the information in an email to everybody the Friday before someone started. Like Amanda said, you could do it in some kind of like all hands Teams group, something in Slack, if you utilize things like that, any kind of intranet. But again, just that it's able to be seen by everybody. And I lean heavily on the everybody part, that it includes the entire company, not just my department, not just my direct coworkers. Especially now that everyone's remote, there could be people that are joining the team that when everyone hopefully gets back to work physically, there's going to be a like, wait, who are these people? Like, I didn't even know that all these people started when we were in quarantine. So I think that that's an important part, to just be sure that everyone is able to view it. Everyone gets a sense of your company growing and who's joining the team.
Yeah, great point, Max. And I think you spoke to this as well. When you do have a new hire, making sure that you introduce them is really important too, so that people can individually reach out if they feel compelled to say, welcome to our team, looking forward to working with you. Really has that sense of, team camaraderie with that as well.
Yes, for sure.
So we have another question on here. And this is a great one because we run into this all the time working with clients, is when we terminate an employee in the office, we need to provide them with their final pay on the spot. So that is definitely a final pay requirement here in Massachusetts. And so the question is, how does this work when terminating an employee remotely? If we send a check or direct deposit, there is a risk that that would tip off the employee. Are we able to have their pay delivered the next day? And so just to kind of speak on that, it is, still supposed to be the same day in Massachusetts. And, this is a new environment for a lot of employers and it poses its own problems. So what I have suggested with some clients, and Max might have some other suggestions, but to kind of link up with a delivery service or a courier service that can deliver it to the employee's home address. And so, that could also be part of the termination meeting, stating that, you will have a check delivered to them today. Will you be around, between the hours of 2 and 4, where it will be delivered? Another option is to, if you have an office or a physical location, is to put it in, an envelope or, have a final paycheck cut where you can, coordinate a time with the employee to safely put it maybe on the outside of the building if it's secure enough, or depending on the layoff or the termination reason, maybe even coming into the front desk to have it available for them.
Yeah, I mean, really the only other option that I've utilized in the past was, if it was, depending on the situation, having money wired. But of course that incurs an additional fee and it's usually my like last resort. But again, if there is like no other option, I think that is it's a good option to have to get funds to someone immediately.
Yeah, that's also a great way to kind of put that on there as a consideration. So, we talked about preparation. Maybe this is something, if you're anticipating something, that you do reach out to either a courier service to find out how that would work. And there are definitely fees associated with that. But, to be in compliance, sometimes it's just easier to have that set up ahead of time. Another question is, does MassPay or MP link with any ATS systems such as Jazz HR? Brittany, would you be able to speak on this?
Yes, we do. We have a few applicant tracking systems that we work very closely with, and that's a great question for onboarding. Many times I've seen with a lot of these applicant tracking systems, when an employee applies and they are then hired and they go through that whole process on the ATS system, there is a link that we can connect directly with iSolve. So a lot, not all, but a lot of the information from their application and from their new enrollment forms can actually filter directly into the onboarding system. And that would pre-fill for a lot of the information. Then the employee would only have to go through and verify it and then add anything additional that you require at your company specifically. Great question.
Max, you want to take the last one?
Yeah, it looks like we have.
Brittany can talk on as well.
Yes. So another question we had relating to iSolved is, we have a few positions that don't have computers and it may be difficult for the employee to get electronic access. How does the system accommodate after the fact entry of paper documents?
We have had this come up many times, actually, with the different industries that we work with, and employees don't have access to computers or to laptops to get everything uploaded. And in that case, it can work on a tablet or a cell phone. It's not, I will let you know, it's not as clear and easy as if you were on a desktop, but it can be done. And then for the upload of the actual paper documents, they can either scan from their computer or their phone rather, take a picture of it, scan it, and load it that way. Or I've seen them actually send the paper documents to their employer, and then the administrator who is managing that can actually scan it and load it in after they have been onboarded into their employee documents section. But for when I was talking about like the WOTC forms, those are actual forms that are filled out right through the onboarding process. They don't have to be printed and uploaded again. They're all electronic. But for forms that are being uploaded by the employees, they would either send them to their employer and have them scanned or take a picture on their phone.
Great information, Brittany. I want to thank everyone who has joined us today and for some really great questions that were presented. I'm going to pass it back to Jackie. I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Awesome. Thank you to Max, Brittany, and Amanda for presenting today. We want to thank all of you again for attending this webinar, and we hope that you came away with some helpful information in regards to the onboarding and offboarding process. If you have any further questions, please send them to marketing@mp-hr.com. We hope you stay healthy and have a great day, and we will see you next week.